Coming to get you, Barbara.
I ain't one to make a fuss about a thing like that.
Make your wishes.
They're coming for you.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Deep Cuts of Horror, where we take a look at and analyze the overlooked and underappreciated films in the annals of horror cinema and decide if we think they are deep or if they should be cut. It's so good to see you guys again. Today, I am very excited about our show. We have a really awesome guest host this week. I'm personally excited because she's like a really good friend of mine. I just can't wait for you guys to meet her and love her as much as I do. Everybody say hi to Martha.
Hi everybody.
Hi.
I'm Martha.
How's it going,
It's my day off work and I'm doing something I enjoy, which is talking about horror. So honestly, it can't get better.
Awesome. So, tell me, Martha, out of all the podcasts you could have been on, Cracked, Joe Rogan, out of all of those, why did you choose my little podcast to grace us?
It might just be because we basically talk in podcast form normally anyways. So it would be so easy for us to do, is to record a podcast together. Honestly, we've been being best friends as long as we have been.
God knows, and how long have we just had conversations where we were like, okay, we need to start a podcast?
Yeah, and then we spend whole weekends just binge watching whole horror franchises from start to finish and just sitting there talking the entire time the movie's going on. So it's just natural for us to be that way.
I love it. It's the best. All right, so just so everyone can get to know you, Martha, I kind of have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
For the sake of things being climactic, let's just say that I didn't already send you a text message of what these questions are, and these are just rapid fire. You don't even know it.
Okay.
Okay. So, what got you into horror? Like, what's your genesis? What's baby Martha was completely normal, and then she watched her first scary movie or saw her first scary picture, and it really messed her up and got her to where she is now?
Yeah, I have an origin story for sure. So, growing up in rural Tennessee, we didn't have much money, so we didn't have extra money for cable and stuff. So all we had was a DVD player or a VHS player, and so we just watched the same stuff over and over again. And a lot of the times we would just be watching what my dad wanted to watch, and my dad. He really likes action and horror movies, so we would watch stuff like Evil Dead, The Army of Darkness, movies like that. And so at first when I was itty bitty, yeah, they kind of scared me a little bit, but I think I just got used to them and then became nostalgic to me because we would watch them over and over again. So I knew them like the back of my hand. So they quickly became like comfort movies to me. So that kind of gatewayed me into turning to horror films in times that I needed comfort or I needed something that I felt would entertain me.
And
So
can I just say The Evil Dead is like the best horror movie to
yes.
watch when you're from rural Tennessee because it took place in Tennessee. I don't know if it
Yeah,
was...
they filmed it.
Yeah, they filmed it in Manchester, I think it was. I know the place
Yeah.
isn't there anymore because it got destroyed, but...
Homeless people, yeah.
Homeless people, but wouldn't it be crazy if you had a horror collection, you could say, okay, this is a brick from the chimney, or
Oh
this
my
is a
gosh.
piece of wood from the cabin.
If only I'd be geeking out so hard over something like that, honestly, because that's actually one of my favorite franchises is The Evil Dead. But that was also
Mentally, I had to think about what I would do in that situation. If I saw the cabin, would I take a piece of it or would I just leave it? Because it's The Evil Dead. It's not exactly a piece of cinema that really needs preserving. Per
no,
se.
it's definitely not because it was so low budget and they did it for nothing. They basically just took some of their friends out there and was just like, let's make a movie and put it in these film festivals.
And that's not even
the
cabin they wanted to use either.
No,
That was
no,
like
it's not.
that was the fourth or fifth option that they had because their actual cabin fell through because I think the owner sold the original one and some guy
Yeah.
just came up saying, "Hey, I know a cabin."
And they even lived in the cabin while they were filming it. They were so low budget they could not afford housing anywhere else, so they actually lived in the cabin while they were filming.
Oh my gosh, that movie is just a whole mess. I've been wanting to have an outlet to talk about The Evil Dead on the show. Unfortunately, it's not really a deep cut, so I think the closest we're gonna get is maybe someday we might do Evil Dead the musical.
Ooh, yes,
I
that's
think you're going to
definitely
be
because
on there.
yeah, we should. I definitely should be considering I'm the Evil Dead obsessed one.
Okay, so maybe we already talked about this, but what is your favorite scary movie?
Yeah, so it is. It's probably a toss up between the Evil Dead and the Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay,
Because I just love Wes Craven
so you
and
just
what
kind of
he
like
does.
that horror fantasy sort of thing?
Yes.
Is it? Do
Yeah.
you prefer things that are more special effects heavy, or what do you go into a horror movie looking for?
I really like practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
I really prefer those because to me they're just so, I don't know, they're just a lot more gory to me and a lot
Mm-hmm.
more over the top ridiculous than
Mm-hmm.
the special effects one. And you look at it and you just think to yourself, how did they do this? And how did they make it so convincing? And I also really like it when the bad guys in the horror movies are actual characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love stuff like Michael and Jason. Like, don't get it twisted. But like characters like Freddy that have that personality and have that back and forth with the characters, and it actually brings out development for the characters overall. I enjoy that a lot more than just the lurking in the darkness and the uneasiness of what's waiting out there.
I like it whenever movies have just as interesting of a behind the scenes story as they do an in front of the camera story. Evil Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street, especially, they have whole documentaries you can watch that are hours and hours long dedicated to just the making of it, and it's just as wild as what we see on screen.
Oh yeah, I love watching those. Because like you said, it's just the stories behind them. Like you get to find out why they did the way that they did it and how they wanted it to be interpreted and how the way that they were doing it would help it be interpreted the way they wanted to interpret it. To me, that's always fascinating because you get to see the idea that they had before they created it and what caused them to change certain things or keep certain things or fight to keep things that other people wanted to cut in the creative process. And it's just really fascinating because they'll tell you the story of, hey, I had this idea, I wanted to do this, but when we went in trying to do the effects for this, it didn't quite turn out that way, but it turned out this way, and it's even better than I thought it was going to be, or we just couldn't make it work and we had to cut it, but it's interesting seeing that original idea. So that I think that's why I enjoy those just as much as the actual movies because just the whole creative process as a whole when it comes to horror movies is just so fascinating because think about the things you have to think about to come up with a
Mhm.
horror movie premise and to actually create a horror movie.
I just love it. For our listeners who haven't seen it, there's a documentary out there called Never Sleep Again. It's about a 4.5 hour documentary that just goes through every one of the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies and basically fine tune details the creative process with talking heads from the entire series. It's
Yeah,
really
and
great. And when
Shudder.
Dylan has really watched it, I think Shudder, if that were a movie that you could rent nowadays, it would probably be one of the movies that I just turn in, rent right back because I've just seen it so many times. It's almost, I've seen it as much as I've seen the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which is a real favorite of mine.
Yeah, and I think Shudder has like a whole section of like these
Yes.
documentaries and stuff, or at least
Hmm.
they used to. I don't know if they've taken them down, but I know I have Never Sleep Again on DVD. So I'm actually probably gonna watch that when we finish this because now I haven't seen it in a couple of years and I feel like sinking a few hours of my day into it.
I need to get that. I've just been watching it on Shudder, and I don't know if they still have it or not.
I got it at Game Exchange. It was one of my finds, one of my treasures from Game Exchange.
Oh my god, look at you. I'm so jealous. I really also like the same people they did Crystal Lake Memories.
Is that the one with Jason or the Friday the 13th
Yes,
movies?
Crystal Lake
Okay, yeah, I've
Memories,
seen
yes.
that one too.
That was a little bit
I just don't
longer.
have it.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were the same people, right? That did
yes.
it? That's what I thought, because they were just very similarly formatted,
Hmm.
and the way that they did like the whole interviews and stuff were very similar. So I had assumed they were the same people.
And that's gotta be
Um,
so complicated, getting all of those talking heads together and scheduling that out. I'm sure a lot of them live in proximity, but there's some outliers that Friday the 13th Part 8 was their one movie they did, and then they moved to a remote corner of Wyoming, and they had to have a whole research team just to find that person.
Yeah, especially considering they they did these documentaries, like decades after the original movie started coming out and it was on screen. So I can only imagine how scattered everybody and everything was. Now, some of the interviews, I feel like, I might just be making this up in my mind, but I feel like some of the interviews that they did them at like Comic Cons and stuff, where these people had gathered for Comic Con and stuff. I may be wrong and I may just be making that up in my mind, but I feel like that's something that they did
Oh yeah, there was
with these.
definitely some guerrilla tactic there, I feel like. And you can tell where some people got really successful doing the movies because they're not going to be in it. For example,
Yes.
Nightmare on Elm Street, Johnny
Johnny
Depp,
Depp.
he doesn't make
Yep.
his appearance. Friday the 13th, I don't think Kevin Bacon makes his appearance in the Crystal Lake Memories documentary.
No.
I heard
yeah.
they're working on another one, but I forget what it is. But on the subject of documentaries, did you ever get to see Scream Queen on Shudder about Mark
I
Patton
have
and Nightmare on Elm
not.
Street 2?
No, I have not. Actually, you know what? I
So
might have.
good.
Well, if I didn't, I saw something that talked all about it. If I didn't watch that one, I did watch something that was just focused on the second Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Or maybe I'm just making that up in my head and I'm just thinking about when that section of the documentary of all the movies they talked about it. But I'll definitely check it out. And
So
I'll probably,
good.
if I have watched it, I'll probably watch it again.
All right, real quick, since we're kind of on this little bit of a tangent, let's talk about the good old days of rental horror. You and me kind of have a shared experience when it comes to our upbringing. We didn't really have a Blockbuster or a Hollywood Video. We had a TV and appliance store.
Yes, and my my parents were
68% of the store was selling appliances and furniture, and then the rest of it was a video rental center. But that place was kind of a heaven for me.
Yes, and we called it Carlos's because Carlos is the man that owned it. And he actually still is in business. He still does the DVD rentals. He just moved shop.
Sponsor us, please.
Yeah. So when my fun fact, he's actually a family friend. He's considered a family friend because when my parents first moved up here, from relocating from Florida, they bought all of their original appliances from him. So it became like a routine, like a regular thing that when my mom would come to pay her monthly bill for the appliances, I would get a week's worth of movie rentals to spice up our DVD collection for the week. And I would just binge watch them all in like a day and then they would just sit there. And my mom was like, why don't you just space them out? Like you've got like a week's worth. You can watch like one a day. And I'm like, I want to watch these movies now. Um, but he's still, what kills me is he still is in business. He just moved shop from one spot to another in town. And I bought my couch off him. That couch is in my apartment. And I remember going in there just thinking, oh, he's upgraded to Blu-ray.
Oh, he still does the video rentals?
Yes, he
Thank
still does
God,
the video
thank
rentals
God.
with it.
I saw
He's
they
so
went out
pure.
of business, and I saw they moved to locations, and it was kind of an end of an era thing for me because I remember going there all the time, renting cartoons, and then eventually just renting movies and horror movies. Horror
Me? Oh
movies
my
that where
gosh.
the front cover was so sun bleached you could barely make out what was on the cover.
And you could tell Carlos liked horror movies because that was like 50% of the movies he had available was all horror movies. But he didn't want to scare kids with the DVD covers. So he moved the horror movie section away from like the kids section and like you had to walk like a whole little section over to be able to look at the horror movies. And I remember when I was a little kid, I wouldn't go over there. Like I was scared. I was like I'd see these jacket covers and I would just get really scared of them.
The one time I went into Video Max, which was like a competitor across town, the horror movie section, I don't know if they did this intentionally, the fluorescent light above it was out. So it just looked like a darker place. Because the kids' movies were right in front. You had the window from the shop giving it a lot of sun. It was bright, it was airy, but then you look toward the back, it was just dark and ominous. And I remember seeing the cover for, I think, 1992's Francis Ford Coppola, Dracula, and it scared the crap out of me, and I said, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going back there. That's an evil place.
And you know what I love about it is one of my fondest memory of like renting from the store is like that's how I first saw Rose Red, like Stephen King's Rose Red.
Oh my god.
Was Carlos at Sparta TV and Appliance. He had Rose Red on VHS where you stuck it in and I'm pretty sure the VHS you could just watch the whole thing. Like I don't think it maybe you had to flip it over and put it back in. I can't really remember.
No,
Um,
it was a
or was it a
not
two
a
pack?
clamshell. It was a 2-pack. It had to be a
That's what it
2-pack.
was.
Because
Gotcha.
I still somewhere have part 2 of Rose Red, just
Oh,
part
okay,
2.
okay.
Somehow they got separated, and now all I have is just the second tape. But that's a really good part of it. And then I also really loved, my parents should have known how I was going to be about film, because I would watch the movie and wouldn't care for it, but anytime there was a making of documentary at the end of the VHS tape, because back in the day you didn't have special features, you just had to
Yeah, at the end.
watch all the way to the end of the tape and hope there was something. I watched the Angela Lansbury hosted Wizard of Oz documentary they had at the end of the Wizard of Oz, probably more than I watched the actual Wizard of Oz when I was 4. Because Baby Dylan just loved the drama about Judy Garland being forced to only smoke packs of cigarettes and eat chicken broth as her diet.
Bless her heart. Now, I think for me, the one that stands out the most, because I did the same thing,
Hmm.
because, I would watch till the end for like the special
Hmm.
features and stuff like that. And the one that I remember so distinctly was the VHS that I had of the first live action Scooby-Doo movie. Oh, where they
They
go to
had
that
all the
island.
special features on that.
Yes, like they were, and I remember like it's so blurred into my memory that sometimes I forget that the deleted scenes they have at the end are not actually in the movie. So when I rewatched the movie last week, on a streaming platform, I was like, where is the scene where Velma sings on the piano all seductively? Like, where is that? And then I was like, oh wait, that got cut.
Wait. You watched it without me? Okay, I'm mad.
I have to do something to fill this
Next time
boredom.
we're together, we're gonna watch the Scooby-Doo movies. Um,
Yes.
can we talk about the R-rated Scooby-Doo erasure?
What's that?
So James Gunn penned the script for the original Scooby-Doo, and it was originally rated R.
See, I can believe that based on some of those deleted
There
scenes.
is an R. He claims there's an R-rated cut out there, and if we can get Zack Snyder's Justice League, I want the R-rated Scooby-Doo. But it
I
just
want
has
that
such
too.
a clean nostalgia for the early 2000s. Just in how it plays with
Yes, their
colors.
hair.
Every time summer and spring break come around, I love to watch it. I love to watch it. It's
Yeah.
my favorite, and we'll
I think that's
probably.
why I watched it too, because of the season it is right now with it hitting like early spring. I was just like spring break. I was like, this just movie is just like early 2000s, like spring break. Flying to an island with your friends to just drink all day and party.
Okay, yeah, but that's not what it was about because it was rated PG. They weren't doing any of that, Martha. Gosh. They were there to solve a mystery.
Yeah, of why the kids were coming back passive aggressive. That was the whole mystery is why are these kids coming back grumpy?
Oh, they learned about the housing market.
the semester was starting again.
They learned what the job market's going to be like when they get out of college.
And that their student debt doesn't just go away and their paying jobs is not going to be enough to pay it down before they're 50.
And they're not going to be able to get an applicable job in their major.
No, and then by the time they're done paying off their student debt, they've not saved for retirement, so they can't retire till they're 80.
Sometimes, whenever I'm getting yelled at work, it just goes off in my head, get off my grill, son! I just want to throw people.
And just push them, shove them away the way. I just saw that scene in my head as you said that. Gosh, I've seen that movie to me. It's one of those movies that we had on either VHS or DVD that I would just watch over and over and over again. That I know each scene. Like when I was watching it last week, I knew like every line for line, and it scared me. I was like, I've not watched this movie in like 5 years. Why do I still know
It
everything
was.
like that?
For us kids, it was a bit of a phenomenon at the time. You had. You didn't have that before. I
That's
mean, that
true.
sort of. Because the live action Scooby Doo, that was a big deal. That was before a lot of animated stuff started doing live actions. You had the one offs with like Captain of the Universe, not Captain of the Universe, Masters of the Universe,
Mhm.
small things like that. But this was a big budget live action creation of Scooby-Doo. And at the time, Scooby-Doo looked pretty good.
Yeah,
Even
honestly,
now, I
yes.
suspend my disbelief. It's a talking dog and it's supposed to be animated. It's not going to look any better. I don't know what you want. Do you want?
I don't think they could have done better. Even today, I don't think they could do better than what they did then. I think that was like peak it's gonna get for Scooby-Doo.
I want them to remake the live action Scooby Doo, but I want them to use the technology they used in the movie Cats. I want a
They'd burn the earth.
humanoid.
The
Yes,
world would burn to the ground,
I
Dylan.
want a humanoid dog person.
Oh,
Same
that would be
lines. We can
perfect.
just do a
Oh
dub.
my gosh.
And
And
that movie's the first movie that introduced me to a lifelong crush of Matthew Lillard.
that's what I was about to say. Can we please talk about Matthew?
I
Because
am not
he's
about to
just
work on my unhealthy obsession with Matthew Lillard. Mm-mm.
I can't get over. He's in everything that's perfect. Like he's unpopular. I've noticed this recently. A lot of people on that I follow these horror forums and stuff on Facebook, these groups. Anytime there's a post about 13 Ghosts, people just crap on it in the comments, and I'm like, how do y'all not just absolutely adore the absolute mess that is 13 Ghosts? Like, I just don't get it.
Real talk,
Like,
Martha. I haven't seen 13 Ghosts.
you've not seen the 13 Ghosts?
Let's take it back. Dylan was 6 years old. I was in a Dollar General. I saw it. I wanted it. And Dad said I couldn't have it because I was 6 years old, kind of made a fit about wanting it real loud. And he was worried it would make him look like a bad parent if he bought it for me. So I never got to see it.
Okay, as much as you love Matthew, and us, I'll bring it with me
It's
when I
on
come
my
down there.
to-watch list. It really is. Bring it. Bring
Well,
it. I want to
I,
see
I
it.
have it. Okay, here, let me show you real quick
Oh,
the
Lord.
case
Here
that
we
I have
go.
it in. This was another one of my game exchange finds, and it makes me so happy. It has the
uh,
on it, and it
I s-
just
and I've read all the
beautiful.
lore about, oh my gosh, it's the little cardboard
Yeah.
case. Love it.
Yes. I
And
saw it and
that's
I was
what
like,
the
I have to
original
have that
Scooby-Doo
one.
was in, too.
Yes.
I love it. I'm so excited. That's so awesome.
I'll bring
Oh,
it and we'll watch it because it's
so much early
you're gonna love
2000s
it.
nostalgia. Oh, I know I am. I've read all the lore about the 13 Ghosts, and I like it. I have a feeling the movie doesn't get that seriously into it. I feel like the movie was plagued with
Doesn't.
production issues. I
Yeah.
feel like the creator wanted to do a whole lot more with it, and they just wouldn't let him because it
Well,
was
there
a Warner
is.
Brothers release.
Now, I do know this copy that I have does have the special features that shows you the trailer that they made or the little mini doc
Mm-hmm.
they made over the 13 ghosts, like the lore of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really go that in depth in the actual movies about them. Like you just kind of get this is what their names are, and they kind of just think you're gonna assume what's happened to the ghosts based on their appearances and the way that they act. Yeah.
God, now I'm excited. Now I am excited to see it. Okay, we should probably get talking about the movie before we get into any more 2000s nostalgia. But speaking of 2000s nostalgia, like I said last time we recorded, we are doing Cherry Falls, starring the very talented late great Brittany Murphy, R.I.P.
My heart. I love her so
Yes, and
much.
that is why I brought you on the show because you were my resident Brittany Murphy fan.
Yes, I do. And I just love her so much. The way that the work that she's done, it's just beautiful. And honestly, watching Cherry Falls, because I had never seen Cherry Falls. I didn't even know it was a thing. I only knew it was a thing very recently when I was actually watching a documentary on Brittany Murphy because I love her so much. One of my a YouTuber that I like to watch made an actual documentary on her, and they covered Cherry Falls in it and her performance in it. They didn't really go into depth about what it was about or what really happened in it. They just, kind of talked about her character a little bit and how Brittany Murphy kind of put her own spin on it and made it her own character.
She
And
really
I
did.
was intrigued then, but I couldn't find it anywhere right off the bat to watch it. So I just kind of was like, I'll watch it
Mhm.
at some point. And then you came to me and was like, let's do Cherry Falls for your episode. And I was just like, yes, it's got Brittany Murphy. Yes. And so I was definitely excited to watch it because I love her so much and just her uniqueness that she brings to all of her characters and just her craft in general was just phenomenal. She gave her best in pretty much anything she did.
I was gonna say, on paper, this role is very minimal, but she does a lot with it. And I could say that with a lot of the actors, because there are definitely some choices throughout here that are definitely acting choices. But I found myself really enjoying it. And speaking of the namesake of the show, Deep Cuts of Horror, this movie was so much of a deep cut, it almost didn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah, well, no, this whole episode didn't almost happen because when we were recording, my lovely friend Martha wanted it to be fresh in her mind. So last night she was going to watch it and it wasn't anywhere. And I said, "What are you talking about? It's on Shudder." She's like, "No, it's not." And I looked, and it wasn't there. And I was looking online. It wasn't on YouTube. It wasn't on Amazon. It wasn't on Sling. It wasn't anywhere. And come to find out, they were pulling it that day in 3 hours. So we had 3 hours left to watch it on AMC Plus. So I quickly got a free trial of AMC Plus just so she could watch this movie.
And I did. I remember you were texting me. You were just like, "Now let me know when as soon as you finish it, so I can go I can go cancel my free trial." And it did. I did. And one of my friends was like, "Aren't you gonna watch it twice so you have a really good perspective?" And as I was watching it, I was like, I don't really need to watch this twice to have a good perspective on what's going on with it.
Also, you don't
Honestly.
have time. You don't
Yeah,
have
I was like,
enough time.
yeah, I was like, also, it's gonna be pulled mid watching it, if I try to watch it a second time. So we're just not gonna be able to do that, but that's fine. I got to see it, I got to watch it, and it is still fresh in my mind. I had to take notes, because I knew I was only gonna be able to watch it once. And so now I'm just gonna be forced to buy it on DVD and add it to my collection,
I
because
know
it needs to be in
Scream
my collection
Factory did
now.
a Blu-ray of it. So
Yeah,
it is accessible, and I kind of want to buy it because it's a really good movie. It exceeded my expectations. I
honestly,
mostly
same.
just wanted you here so we could talk about Brittany Murphy because I don't really know much about her outside of being Luann in my favorite anime, King of the Hill.
You and your anime, Dylan.
I know, like my two. What are your favorite animes? My two favorite animes: King of the Hill, Spirited Away.
Such a weeb.
I
Oh,
know.
bless it. Definitely, definitely. I am obviously not as big a weeb as you are, Dylan, because the animes I like to watch are the foreign ones. They don't even speak in English. So,
Yeah, what even are those? Do they at least sell propane and propane accessories?
honestly, there is just a lot of blood.
So when you say foreign languages, are they speaking in Espanol?
No, no, like the traditional like Japanese.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
yeah, like
Well, anyway, considering the budget of this movie was 14 million, and from the numbers I could pull, it made 85,000 pounds. Wah wah.
oh,
This movie
it was
became a
really
quick
14 million
deep cut.
was the budget?
Yes, $14 million was the budget on this guy. I know there are some scenes that look decent, but then there are some shots in this movie that look like straight up ass.
Did they spend it all to rent the school or something? Because that school was big. And it was like, you could tell, like, they took a lot of time to pick the school.
Brittany Murphy was a hot commodity playing Luann, and she wanted 12 million. So they had
Oh, okay.
2 million. I don't. That isn't actually true. I'm just saying that.
Because she was, like, this was right as she was getting bigger. Like, she wasn't massive at this point, but she was, at this point, had done, like, a couple of decent things
She
under
did
her belt.
Clueless. She was.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say at this time she was the name draw for this
She
movie.
was, but she also, with, like, roles like Clueless and stuff, she also wasn't the main role in
She was as
those.
close to a main draw as they were gonna get.
Exactly. And so they probably saw a lot of promise in her acting and things like Clueless and stuff like that because she does a really great job of playing characters that you kind of discredit at the beginning. You don't think they're really going to be much of anything, and then she just blossoms them into their own unique take on it, and you really think more about the character towards the end of the movie.
Oh my gosh, I just loved her in this. There was a quirky charm about her in this whole movie as a protagonist. This didn't strike me as a character who would be a protagonist in any other scary movie.
That's
But
true. I mean, it did have a couple of like typical tropes to her character about it,
certainly.
like being the sheriff's daughter. Like
And
when I
being the
saw her
virgin.
dad, yeah, and being a virgin and having that boyfriend that just kind of a dickwad. I mean, granted, he does later on, kind of,
He's
I
sort of
guess, make up
redeemable,
for
but
it.
I definitely
Yeah.
wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't sleep with him.
He just reminded me of my first boyfriend so much because, that's one
Oh,
thing that I feel like we both agree that we like about this movie is the fact that the teenage characters in it actually act like teenagers.
they do. And
Y
they
you
look like
don't,
teenager. They're not hot. At the time after Scream came out, the big thing to do was make teen movies where you have 20, 30-year-olds playing hot, hypersexualized versions of what teenagers are, kind of like Riverdale.
yeah, and the teenagers, they react in teenager fashion when things happen. They
Hmm.
don't magically know martial arts. They don't magically get away. Like there's actual struggles there. And watching it, I just kind of thought to myself, I was like, I feel like I would definitely die in this situation,
I
because
feel
I
like if
wouldn't
I
be able
had
to get
this
away.
movie, oh honey, I wouldn't die. I wouldn't be dying in this movie. I'm not what you call the target audience.
No, I would have died. I definitely would have died if this had happened when I was in high school. I 1000% would have died,
I feel like I would have really
being
loved this
honest.
movie if I was still in high school. This movie would scratch that alt itch.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
'Cause all these
Emo Martha would
protagonists
have
are just,
died.
yes, all these
I would have
characters are
loved
so
it.
alt and wonderful, and little baby emo Dylan would have just loved it.
Oh yes, no, oh my gosh. So I loved the grunge aesthetic of like the early 2000, like late 90s, early 2000s when I was in high school. I mean, I still really like it. I just know that it's I don't know. I just don't go out of my way to try to achieve that style anymore. I guess because I'm a grown up now. But when I was a teenager, like I was constantly buying like jewelry pieces and like everything was in black. I mean, I still prefer my clothes to be in black, but that's just because that looks best on me. But I definitely, if I had seen this movie when I was that age, I would have gone to Claire's that afternoon to get some more punk jewelry and stuff.
I can't even describe what I would have done and it doesn't seem pretentious at all either. I
No, it
think
seems
that's what
natural.
when we say the movie looks like ass. It looks like ass because maybe it's trying to fulfill that grunge aesthetic, but there are some shots that straight up look like they were taken on a handheld digital camera.
Yeah, and honestly, like I was impressed by the fact that Brittany Murphy's character, Jody, had a cell phone. Like that surprised me because like this was literally like right at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and
Hmm.
I don't know about y'all, but around here, you only had a cell phone. Cell phones didn't really become like a normal everyday person thing until like 2005, 2006, I feel like.
Hmm.
Maybe that's just because I grew up in a poor area that I feel that way. But when I saw she had a cell phone, I was just like, someone gave this teenager a cell phone in 2000? I was like, what the crap? I felt like they were just for businessmen back then.
So what do you think okay, what do you think Brittany Murphy's character would have recorded on her phone from the radio as her ringtone?
Oh, that's a good question now that I'm thinking about it.
Because she is exactly the one to do that.
I feel like it would be something like Radiohead.
Oh yeah.
Like Radiohead or Slipknot,
Hmm.
or even like Shinedown.
Okay, yeah, she does strike me as a Shinedown girl. We won't even talk about what her text signature would be.
I wonder if it would be like Jody and Kenny Hart, or if it would be something more like I don't know. She had a lot of character to her, to be honest.
You
Like
mean
I
you
wasn't
mean
expecting as much from her.
Jody less than 3 Kenny?
Yeah, that's exactly what it'd be. But I mean, I instantly like the very first, like one of the first lines she had in the whole movie, I just connected with her instantly just because her sense of humor was like it was.
Okay, yes, one of the lines that I saw here that said, "Is this goodbye or good night?" I feel emo
Oh.
Martha would have went crazy for that, and that would have been on her MySpace so hard.
Yeah, and then I feel like her answer also, like, I feel like his answer also when she was like, "So is this goodbye or good night?" And she's like half crying, and he's just like, "Well, that's up to you." And it's all over the fact that she doesn't want to have sex. And I
But I
mean,
guess when you're in high school, that's just on the forefront. This
that's
is,
true.
we've
I mean,
been
I
dating
related
a
to this.
year. We've been dating a year.
Yeah, and what killed me is I think I resonated with it because I think like my very first boyfriend in high school, my freshman year, he broke up with me because I did not want to sleep with him. Because I was like, I'm 15, I don't want to have sex. So like I related to her character in the fact that she was like she is just like I just don't want to. I'm not ready. It's just not what I want to do. And he was just like,
I still watch
well,
Disney Channel. What are you talking about? I'm not ready to have sex.
yeah. And when he was just like, well, this is a big issue for me, and she was just like, well, so is global warming for me. So she was like, it's right on up there with global warming.
So, going into the cold open for this movie, you have a couple, Rod and Stacy. They're parking, and I love a good parking scene. They don't have them anymore, probably because we all just kind of unanimously decided if a man takes you to an abandoned piece of the forest, you're probably gonna die. Either he's gonna
Yeah.
kill you or someone's gonna kill both of you. But no way do both of you come out alive.
No, it just doesn't happen
And I love
because of
how
movies
this
like this.
Rod guy just kind of looks vaguely like Bruce Campbell.
What? Yes, yes, I agree with that. Kind of like Bruce Campbell and Paul Rudd had a baby, like them spliced together, which was two of my favorite people. So I actually kind of enjoyed him. But when he opened his mouth and was talking about trying to sweet talk this chick, saying he's from outer space and that he needs to complete his mission to,
To make
to,
love to you in the manner
to
of my
make
people.
love. I was just like, yeah, no, how is this getting him light? So like
When they
when
were
she got out
talking
of the
about that, I
car.
was so dry. I was so dry. I was the Sahara Desert made out of sandpaper. I was so dry.
Basically, I was like honest. I was like, oh Lord, have mercy. I was like, he actually is attractive. I was like, but he's talking like that, and it just, I would have gotten. And I mean, she did at one point. She just got out of the car. She's just like, nope, and she just got out of the car, and he's like, baby, come back. I need to complete my mission. And she's like, okay.
But
And
how
she's
many Tinder dates have we been on where we just let stuff like that slide?
You know what? Yeah, I can understand. Yeah, yeah, you have to call me out like that,
I
but
mean, I've done it too.
and they just start saying weird stuff, and you're just like, but they're cute.
They're cute. I'm just gonna make sure. I'm just gonna go ahead and dial 911 in my phone, and if this goes south, we have an
That or you
exit
just like
strategy.
that, or you just tell yourself, well, I mean, I'm just gonna sleep with them. It's not like I'm gonna date them. So if they're a little bit weird, it's fine.
Go ahead, boo boo. Complete your mission.
Like I came here.
Report back to your leader. Tell him what you seen.
Exactly. You're basically just like, I didn't come here to fall in love, so if they have an obsession with talking in the third person or about being from space, it's fine. I don't have to deal with it more than the 5 minutes that they're gonna last. So it's fine.
Exactly. And whenever they're done, we'll just turn on Battlestar Galactica and I'll make my exit.
Basically.
Easy
And I
peasy.
mean, yeah, and so that might have been what poor Stacy had in mind. She might have just been wanting to just get it over with and then just be done with it. So maybe then he'd shut up about it, and maybe then he'd stop talking like he was in space.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I just realized this movie takes place in Virginia.
Yes. Up north.
Virgin. Yeah.
No, I actually saw that last night when it was when they were talking about it being in Virginia. I was like, Virgin in Virginia.
I don't know if you can hear it over the protector, but I'm just giving the worst nasal snort ever.
Was it?
Dad
Yeah.
jokes. I would have loved this movie if there was more of that.
Yeah, if there was more wordplay into it, with the virgin, other than just when they just outright were saying that they're killing virgins.
This whole parking fiasco, he's still trying to seduce her with sci-fi talk, and it's not going well. A car pulls up behind them, and a black-haired woman appears and murders them both. My thing with this, the only part about the scene I didn't like is Stacy just kind of sits there and screams. Perhaps we didn't have, and you can't say we didn't have women's agency down yet, because we had at least 3 Scream movies by this point.
Yeah, and we also had like Alien and movies like that where the women were there was plenty of movies out there already that gave women a little bit more credit to survival. But yeah, she just sat there. And honestly, like in my mind, I'm thinking, why don't you just kind of drive away? But then he starts, because he goes down first.
I do like the scene where the door is locked and he's
Yes.
calling outside the door. I do
Yeah.
get that. But
I
on
think
the
that's why she
same
didn't just
end-
leave.
Yes, in the same time, this is the man who was talking about how he had to go back to his alien people to make love to her in the manner of his people. So fuck that guy.
That, and she watched him get stabbed like 30 times. So you know he's not surviving. So at that point, I'd have just been like, sorry, Rod, you're just going to have to bleed to death. I'm going to get out to the road. I might call the cops for you, but I'm getting out of here so I don't get stabbed.
I'm a
But
teenager.
nah.
I'm 16. I'm not even supposed to be here right now. So I'm going to go home and be real shocked when they find your body in a couple months.
Yeah, but she just sits there, like she does have at least the survival instinct to lock the car door. She does do that. She locks the car door. She locks the front, the passenger. In my mind, I'm just sitting there thinking, what about the back doors? But I'm like, you know what? I can't look too much into this. I'm gonna assume the back doors were always locked. And then he just starts calling out to her, Stacy, 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 because he's like dying outside the car.
Call your
And
people.
so she takes like a whole 5 minutes to think about unlocking the door, and then she does, and Rod pops his head in, and then the moment Rod pops his head in, that's when the black-haired woman starts reaching into the car and stabbing for Stacy.
So what do we think about the look of the killer? I was a little bit disappointed when I first saw it because I was expecting something trying to be a bit more iconic.
Yeah, honestly, it gave me, this is gonna sound bad, it gave me grunge vibes, like The Grudge.
Okay, it
Like,
was giving
with
me
the hair.
Pissed Off Samara, from The Ring.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the vibe it was giving me, and I
Or
was just like,
Zombie
this.
Cher.
They were trying really hard to make it obvious that this was somebody that was unhinged with the hair the way they did it, and they tried really hard to give clues to lead you in a direction so that later you'd be surprised, but I think it just kind of fell on its face personally, and maybe that's just because I've watched so many horror movies. I know what to look for. I can't really be surprised with this stuff, but I thought they could have done a little bit better of either just waiting to show the killer. Like, I'd rather them than just not show the killer at all at that point.
Yes,
than
and to the
giving
film's credit, they do try to avoid the face, because really all this character is doing is wearing a long wig.
Yeah, they're wearing a long wig, and they make it a point to do shots of the legs in tights and high heels so that you get the obvious impression it's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, I know what they were doing there, but I don't know. That's just my personal opinion, that I think maybe they would have done better overall to just kind of just been one of those moments where they don't show the killer at all at first, where it's just from the perspective of you're getting stabbed with like a hand or something.
Right. Totally agree. Totally agree. And so we move, I guess, across town where we have another set apart teenagers, Jody, played by Brittany Murphy, and Kenny. And they're kind of going at it, probably not as much as the other couple were, but they're kind of having a talk about not having had sex yet, even after being together a year. And it becomes very clear that Kenny is wanting to break up with Jody because they haven't had sex, which is honestly a douche move. Never do this, guys.
Yeah, and then Jody's just kind of like, I obviously don't want to, so if you're giving me an ultimatum, the ultimatum is we're just going to break up then, because I'm
Right.
not going to, you're not going to pretty much tell me that I'm going to do this and we're not going to be together. I really feel like that's fair or right. So she's just, when he's like, it's up to you, and then in the next few scenes she's talking about them breaking up, it's obvious that her choice was to just let it go and them just break up.
But her hair in this scene, her whole aesthetic, the vibe of these two people is not exactly what you'd expect from leading characters. But I
No,
loved it.
not
I
at all.
loved it.
Yeah, no, it definitely gives like you think in just that first scene that they're going to be supporting characters or something at that point just because the way that they're dressed and the way that they did her hair. Oh my gosh. I wanted to like it so bad because I know the time it was, but it was rough. Like they gave her those really choppy, weird, blunt bangs in that
Hmm.
uneven cut, and
And
it,
teased
I
it
mean,
out.
I think if anyone could have pulled it off the best is Brittany Murphy. They definitely recognize that if anyone could pull it off, it'd be her. But at the same time, it just I don't think that haircut should have existed to begin with. But it was the late '90s, early 2000s. You know, like they when it came to hair, nobody was good.
And Kenny
Um,
had that really messy spike look.
yes, with like the hair gel and stuff.
Hmm.
It was rough. But yeah, they definitely don't have like the main people clean cut aesthetic that you expected. Like Jody definitely is not presented as the perfect girl next door girl like most lead surviving females are supposed to be in these horror movies.
She's more of an actual teenager. She's gonna do stuff that's gonna be a bit troubling, but not necessarily.
But at the same time, she does do realistic teenage stuff like sneaking out, stuff like that. But anytime, it's nothing ever anything that's super awful like you see in some of these other movies.
Yes,
Like
it's
she
not like
does
she's a
have
Euphoria
caution.
teenager.
Yeah, definitely not a Euphoria teenager. She listens to her parents. She takes her parents' feelings into account when she does things. Like she doesn't just she's not out here wild and everywhere.
Yes, she's just out here trying to find her own identity, which I like. So Kenny basically gives Jody the ultimatum, like we said, is this goodbye or goodnight? And basically saying if they're not willing to have sex, it's not happening, that they're going to break up. And this conversation is interrupted by Jody's mother, who I honestly thought was a killer because she's a little crazy and she kind of has crazy eyes. And at some point, I thought her and Kenny were gonna fuck.
See, that was me too. Like the interaction between Kenny and Jody's mom. Just I was just sitting there the whole time like he's got the hots for her mom like bad. Like he's just staring at her, like licking his lips, like talking to her, like offering her cigarettes, like just it you could tell that he was in a mood, and so when her mom walks up and her mom's older and obviously he's had sex because Jody exists, his mind is just in the forefront of, I'd fuck anything that moves right now, and that's Jody's mom, so she's bound to be hot because it's Jody's mom.
Jody's mom has gotta go. But real talk
Listen.
though, Kenny can get it.
Yeah, he is cute in his own way. Like, granted, a lot of his actions in the film are kind of childish, but ultimately, like, you could tell he cares and he's just confused by hormones.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think he can get it. Again, this is me, Matthew Lillard apologist here. His character in Scream can still get it.
Fair point. That is a fair point.
So from this interaction, we also learn that Jody is the daughter of the sheriff of the town.
Yeah,
How
because she
great's
walks
that?
in.
And
Yeah, because she's. It's such a trope for the main girl to be the sheriff's daughter. Like,
I mean, it puts her in the middle of the action. If you have a small town setting, it puts her more in the middle of the action. But you could
exactly, it's a
argue
plot
that she's
device.
already in the middle of the action anyway, given what we learn later in the story.
Yeah, she would have been regardless, but this kind of helps with tying the police investigation and her being able to figure out what's going on while the police are investigating stuff.
Basically, this serves an important purpose for being able to fill an hour and a half runtime.
Yeah, pretty much. So like when she basically revealed because she walks into the kitchen because she spends like a good moment outside talking to her mom about how if she's gonna get in without her dad realizing she was out 15 minutes late
And then he's
that
just
she needed
in
to do it
there.
now. Yeah, she was like, yeah, and he's just in the kitchen when she just walks right in, and he's of course wearing a jacket that's got the sheriff on the side.
Yes, and he gets this little transition confused me. He gets a call, presumably to do with these murders, and it's the middle of the night. He gets this call. He says, "I gotta go," and leaves. And then the next shot, it's daytime,
Yeah, that kind of that was a moment for
and
me
they're
too because
investigating the crime scene.
they make it a point to show that on Jodie's alarm clock, it's like 3 in the morning. It's like 3:25 in the morning on her bedside table while the phone's just sitting there ringing. And then he eventually answers and you hear his voiceover that, he'll be right there. And then you next thing you know, it's like bright ass daylight. And he's just driving to the falls in this bright ass daylight. Like, were they like 2 hours away? like
They
2-3
shouldn't have
hours.
been. It's
It shouldn't have been because it's
they
supposed to be in Cherry
literally live in
Falls.
Cherry Falls, and they were making out right by Cherry Falls, the
Exactly,
falls.
exactly. And so that was kind of a moment where I was like, what? I was also kind of confused by the scene where Jody's like watching her dad drive away because like her eyes aren't open
Hmm.
when she that I was like, is she having a premonition? Like what is this? Because she's just standing there at the window with her eyes closed, and she's like, Daddy. I'm just like, are you sleepwalking? Like, are you having a moment? Like, because obviously the sun's not bright because it's dark outside, so you shouldn't have to squint. Like, I was just confused by that.
But from this investigation, her father and the rest of the investigators learn that they have carved the word virgin into both of the victims. The way they describe it to the people is very grossly negligent, because whenever they do the official report to the school, they say that the killer is targeting people at the high school and also virgins. Why would you release that out there?
I think the main concern, because like you get it before they do that scene, you have the scene where he actually goes into Jody's room and he's just kind of like, "Hey, how far have you and Kenny gone?" And
And
she's
their
like,
their their whole dynamic is weird.
Yeah, it is really odd. Like, but, like you can genuinely tell that he loves his daughter and that he just wants her to be okay. And he's just like,
I
you
thought
know,
he
can
might be
you
the killer.
for I got like I could understand that. Like I never had that suspicion, but like I could see where you'd get that one. And he's just standing there and he's just like, could you and Kenny go any further? And she's like, yeah, but you don't have to worry about it. We broke up. And he just has this look of disappointment. She's like, are you disappointed in me that I'm still a virgin? And he's like, no, no, honey.
He just kind of caresses her face while he's doing this, and that's what makes it
Yeah.
weird for me.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, there's also the point in time where she kisses her mom on the mouth, which is, some people do that. I guess that's normal for some people. I never had that type of interaction with my parents, but I know that, I know some people do it. But like, it's just, I guess they really tried to put those points of contact in there between her and her parents to really convey how much she has a really strong relationship with her parents.
Hmm.
And that she's not one of those teenagers that doesn't really care what her parents say or don't really like aren't really involved with her parents. Like she obviously is. Like she has a very strong bond with her parents. And I feel like that's why scenes like that are conveyed the way they are, is to convey that connection that she has and that closeness she has with them.
Yes, and
To convey that.
a lot like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies with Heather Langenkamp's Nancy character. You do have the main character who acts differently around her parents than with her peers, which is something I always look for and find refreshing. You act differently outside of certain groups, professionally, primary, and your secondary groups. Obviously, you're not going to talk the same way you talk to your friends as you talk to your parents. You're not going to talk to your parents the same way you talk to coworkers or people you don't know as well. And there are a lot of movies where you just have characters who, just for the sake of convenience of the story, are even kill with everybody across the board. They'll talk to their
Yeah.
friends the same way they talk to the sheriff, the same way they talk to their parents, and just do not give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that and see how that makes sense there with that. And as for why they feel the need to tell the parents, I mean, I don't really get that either because like even his deputy was like, you really shouldn't tell them that they're targeting virgins, but he's like, it's not a calling card, it's a message. And we need to warn them so they can keep their kids safe. But at that same time, like, what else are they supposed to do? Like, I
What
mean,
if
I feel
this
like
were
the kids
okay?
reacted.
What if this were happening at a middle school? It's like the killer is targeting people at this middle school and also virgins. Well, there is a big overlap there in those groups of people.
Exactly. I feel like just saying that they're targeting honestly, now that you put it in that perspective, yeah, it makes sense that he should have just been like, they're obviously targeting students, so we need to treat it as such, instead of going in and being like, hey, I called you all here to let you know that we have discovered that not only are they killing our students and our children, but specifically virgins.
And aliens, apparently.
Yeah, and aliens apparently, because R.I.P. Rod, because he was an alien, coming from like Saturn, I think it was, or something. It was some weird
Coming
place,
from
but...
Saturn to Uranus. Hey-o.
Oh my gosh. But I think what kills me is also throughout the movie there's like little bits of like comedic relief. Like the guys are just like the male parents, like the fathers are just like, "Well, what are we supposed to do?" And the other one's like, "Well, I don't think your daughter has to worry." And he's just like, "What's that supposed to mean?" They all start fighting.
Yeah, that is great. One of the characters that I really loved in this was Jody's friend Timmy, who she meets the very next day, and they have the standard trope of whenever the main character goes back to school, everyone's talking about the killer and knows about the killing except her. And so
Yeah.
Timmy fills her in, and again, I stan a good gay alt character, and Timmy ran. He didn't
Yeah.
walk, he ran. And I just love his character to pieces.
Yeah, because he has like probably all of maybe 8 minutes total in the whole movie that he's got screen time and his character's actually interacting. And in that short time, there's just so much personality put into that character that you genuinely kind of you really like him.
And it doesn't feel like a stereotype either.
No, he feels like Timmy is just Timmy. Like I wouldn't know what bracket to put him in. Like he obviously had his own style and personality, but you become very obvious that he cares about what news is going on in school because it's obvious that he runs like the school paper or something, and he wants to get the scoop like before anybody else. And like he's even there. He finds Jody sneaking up and watching the parent conference because at that conference that the police had with the parents, it was only the parents. Kids weren't supposed to be there. So like Jody's sneaking in and looking, and you see Timmy sneaking in and looking too because he wants to get the scoop. And then once they announce that it's the virgins that are dying, he wants to get it out into the papers the next day, so he asked Jody for her cell phone. And she's like, "No, because you'll never give it back." And then he just takes it and he runs off with it. And she's still just there watching the parents fight.
I just thought Timmy's little screen time was so delightful, and it wasn't played up for laughs. I feel like it was so easy at this time too. If you have a token gay character, it's just played up for laughs. And for this character, it just wasn't that for me. The real sad part about this character for me is that the reason he dies is because he's a virgin, and that's probably just because of lack of availability in the town of Cherry Falls.
And I also love it because you can tell he's gay, but no one outright comes out and says Timmy's gay. Like you can just tell.
You can just tell, and no one really makes a big deal out of it. You get this idea that he is an outcast. Him and Jody are both kind of on the outs, but I like having the not popular person perspective, but I also like having the not popular perspective of we're not having Jennifer Love Hewitt and Sarah Michelle Gellar wearing glasses and saying I'm just the ugly, plain, unpopular girl.
Yeah,
Hilary Duff
definitely.
wearing a choker.
Gosh.
It took me God knows how many episodes, but I finally got a Cinderella story into this podcast. I'm a very appealing person.
Yeah, they literally just put her in like a baseball t-shirt and jeans and a choker and a baseball cap, and they're like, she's ugly now. Like she's the ugly duckling now that nobody notices.
And then she puts on a wedding dress and
a mask.
And everyone's like, "Oh,
most beautiful thing ever."
They put some Aussie hairspray and mousse in her hair, scrunch it real good.
Yes.
Do that lovely little lip outline where you put the lip gloss on and then you put a darker shade on the outside of the lip.
They tried so hard, and then she still just looked like prom queen.
She left it all on the floor, is what she did.
Yeah.
But anyway, where we are in the story is Jody's dad, Brent, goes in to see the English teacher, Mr. Lillard, and urges the student body to come in and talk more about what they know about these students to eliminate suspects. This classroom missed the assignment for me in that it looks more like a college lecture instead of an actual high school. But I like the interaction we get with these characters and learning about these characters through their understanding of death and death around them, because they all have their own unique little
take on it.
interpretation of death. You have more denial, you have more disassociative, and then you have the one weird stoner kid who's just like, it happens.
And I mean, they react like you would think teenagers would. You know,
They don't
none of
really have
them.
an idea of life, but they have an opinion on death, but neither are really fully formed.
Exactly, and none of them are like super super deep with it. I think the deepest it gets is that one girl that is crying because she told Rod in the 8th grade to just go and die.
And I feel like that would happen in high school. The one girl who makes
Yes.
everything about herself.
Exactly. That was my thought too. I was like, yeah, there would definitely be a girl that was like 6 years ago, I said this and I never got to say sorry. And you're just like, yeah, you could have, but okay, like it's fine. Like I don't think anyone remembers that, nor did I think he remembered that.
So
I
now
think you're
she's a
fine.
suspect. This movie tries to do red herrings, but it never does them well.
See, that's the thing is I saw through it from the start. Like even like looking back on my notes, I was just laughing because I was just like I saw from the very start what was going on. But they did try to have the red herrings. Like for example, not long after this scene, right before they have the teacher, not the teacher, but the parent conference with the police, Jody's wandering around the school, or she goes to drop off a paper to the English teacher, and she sees somebody outside the room, so they go to investigate, and while they're investigating, you see a shoe, like the person's shoe, and it's got a diamond on it, and you later find out that that shoe was Kenny's, but it has nothing to do with the actual murders. But it definitely was supposed to be like a red herring of, oh, that's the shoe. The shoe was there, so that means like that person was stalking them. They must be the killer, and that was Kenny's shoe, so the killer must be Kenny. It's red herrings like that crack me up about it. Like they really tried with those red herrings. They genuinely did.
I know, and we have this whole lunch scene where, again, we get more Timmy and Jody. I would love if they remade this show and we just had Kenny and Jody. I mean, Timmy and Jody just solving mysteries.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the Jody's mom could be like Scooby-Doo because she's had about
She's
the
out
mentality
there.
of Scooby-Doo.
She's a toon, is what she is. She is a cartoon character. From jump, she is just a fucking toon.
Yeah.
So they're at the lunch table and they see Kenny with another woman. Or a girl, I should say.
Yeah, with Sharon.
That name. I don't know, maybe it's because my mom's a Sharon, but that just seems like such a middle-aged person name.
Well, I mean, my name is Martha. I really I can't judge anybody for their name being like a certain demographic.
I love, don't get me wrong, my mom's a Sharon. I love Sharons, but every time they're like, look at Sharon over there, I just imagined an office admin person just macking on Kenny because we have established that Kenny does like older women.
Yeah, and she was kind of fugly though, so.
Oh my gosh, stop it.
Just kidding. Not really, but she was.
One thing this movie does well, too, you don't have that stereotype of it's the other girl's fault that
Yeah,
that
exactly.
they're dating.
Like,
That's one thing I always hate about stories where people are cheating. They always go to the woman and say, get off my man. Well,
yeah.
honey, it's not her fault.
Yeah, and all Jody really has to say about it is, I wonder if she goes all the way. And then her friend is just like, no, she definitely doesn't. She definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's all that's really said about Sharon as far as like Jody's concerned. Like she doesn't go up. She's not mad at him. She doesn't like make a big scene about it. But she just accepts it for what it is and is just kind of like, oh well, like he's your problem now. Like it's fine. I don't really care.
Yeah, she's gonna sum 41 it that evening.
Yeah. That's how Jody deals with her problems. She just listens to Sum 41.
And writes on her sneakers.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I bet she has like so many. I bet she has a collection of Sharpies.
Oh god, you know she does. You know she does. So that evening, we kind of get a scene that reminds me of a scene in Scream 2 with Sarah Michelle Gellar with this character, Annette, who is home alone. And there's a knock on the door, and we hear a woman's voice, which is weird, because what we learn later about who this killer is perfectly emulates a woman's voice, which really made me think it was the mother.
I get that. I get that. Like, I can see why you would think it was the mother at that point, because I mean, I was wary about it being an actual female, but I did have my doubt. I did actually stop and think, well, maybe it is an actual female with that scene because it does sound 1,000% female. It does not sound like anyone masking their voice. That sounds like that's their voice.
But this killing really isn't that memorable. It happens. The
No.
most memorable part about it is when they find the body and it's suspended from the chandelier.
Yeah, and she's got a ball gag in her mouth.
Yeah, so this killer's just walking around with a ball gag.
Yeah, he brought the ball gag. He brought his knives and a ball gag, and then suspended her from the ceiling after he killed her. And then her parents come home, and they're just kind of walking around the house, um, looking for her. And then they come into that room, and then her mom looks up, and she just shrieks. Which, I mean, granted, like imagine like if that like imagine put yourself in their position. Imagine you had a kid, and you come home from an afternoon of drinking with your friends, and you find them suspended from the ceiling with a ball gag in their mouth, just absolutely decimated and murdered. Like that is just absolutely terrifying, like honestly. But
I feel like they were trying to do the opening of Scream 1,
yeah.
but it was
Yeah.
copy my homework, but don't make it look obvious.
But also in this scene, we get a name from the killer because when the killer is knocking on the door trying to get Annette to let her in, she says, "I'm so and so. Did your mom not tell you I was stopping by? Can I leave a note?" And that's how she gets Annette to open the door.
Which
I can't
totally
remember the
happened
name off the
back
top
then.
of my head. What was the name? Was it Maureen?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I
It
think it's
ultimately
Lorraine.
didn't play into much.
Well, I mean, it kind of did because that to me it did because that whenever the name came up later down the road, I was like, oh yeah, that's what that person said, or that's what the killer said when they wanted in.
Oh. But
Yeah.
every good 90s latchkey kid knew you don't answer the door.
No, you don't. Well,
call
that's the
the
thing that killed
neighbor.
me about it. Yeah, well, what thing that killed me about it is she didn't unlock the door. Like she didn't unlock the. She was just like, okay, slip it through the crack, and then she stuck her head in it like a dumbass, and then and the killer just shoves the door on her head in that small crack, and that's how she gets enough leverage to get into the house and stuff. But you don't open the door. You don't open the door at all, even if it's just a crack. You don't open the door at all. You either act like no one's there. That's what I always did. I just acted like no one. I just went and hid under my covers. I even did that as an adult when I lived in my apartment. Someone knocked on the door and I wasn't expecting company. I just went and hid in my bed until it was like the maintenance person. Then they let themselves in, and then I would feel violated. I'm like, why are you coming into my house?
Peak Martha. Peak Martha. So the next scene we
anyways.
get after they discover the body is of the town meeting, where Jody and Timmy have sort of kind of snuck into to get the scoop. And they're talking about how the killer is attacking virgins and also people that go to the high school. Is it bad that I didn't know it was a parent meeting? I must have zoned out for that. I thought it was students, and they honestly, because again, as well as they dress these quote-unquote teenagers, you can still tell they are late 20s, early 30s.
They do say, like, when he's telling the deputy to make the meeting, he specifically says, no kids, not yet, I just want the parents. And then later, when Jody and the English teacher are looking around for whoever was creeping on them, he even says at the end, well, I need to get to this meeting that your dad organized for parents.
Yeah, I missed that
So
one.
I think you just weren't paying attention.
Yeah, I missed that. The crowd didn't help,
anyways.
because the crowd still looked very much like students.
They looked younger. Like, yeah, they didn't look like they were old enough to have almost adult children.
$10 says the students got to dress as adults.
Yeah, so they didn't have to get more extras.
Yeah.
For sure.
So we have the scene where Timmy asks to borrow Jody's cell phone and goes the stairway to make a call. Jody goes to find him and then discovers his body in the locker room, which is sad. I really wanted a lot more Timmy, and it's also sad because this little baby gay never got to experience his full potential.
Yeah, and instead of they wrote virgin on the actual locker. So even before Jody opens the locker, you know what's going to be in there. Because at this point, we already know that when we see virgin written somewhere or written on something, that person's dead or going to be dead when you look at them. So when she walks up on the locker and it says virgin on it, you already know when she opens it, Timmy's gonna be there and he's not gonna be alive.
As far as stock characters getting killed, Timmy was the most probably caring I felt.
Honestly, same. Like when he went down that stairwell with the phone, I was like, he's gonna die, and that makes me sad. I actually liked him.
Exactly.
Which I still don't get why he went into a stairwell. Cause like he was having the whole reason he went down there. He was like, oh, he was trying to make that call, and he was having bad signal because it's the 2000s and none of the cell phones have any signal.
Can you hear me?
And but
Can
he
you hear
went
me
into
now?
yeah,
Good.
and then he goes into a fucking stairwell.
I'm
Like
gonna
that's
go
gonna
into
make
the
it better.
stairwell to make a phone call.
God.
BRB also gonna go into this meat locker in the stairwell. But this does instigate a chase sequence between Jody and the killer.
Yeah, because the killer's still there, and when the killer sees Jody, he's like, ah, prized fortune, and he takes off after Jody and chases her throughout the whole school. Which honestly, like this for me, was a
Chef's
cool scene
kiss.
because
Mwah.
they're actually full on chasing. Like you can tell both Jody and the killer are like giving it their all to go as quickly as they can. And like you can tell like Brittany Murphy did a beautiful job in this scene because you can tell she is scared for her life.
And
Like
this
she
is where you
genuinely
really tell she is a really good final girl in this scene. Now, again, this is one of the shots where the movie looks like ass.
Yeah, that's true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But just in the way she does things whenever, because the fight ultimately goes to a science lab or something, and she's able to push the killer into this guinea pig sanctuary or something, and she somehow ends up on top of a shelf, and she's just throwing beakers at the guy and just screaming.
Yes.
And I'm like, get it. Get it. That
Yeah,
is.
because you can tell she is doing everything she can to survive. Like, she is picking up everything near her. She is throwing anything. She does not care. She's continuously
I
screaming.
honestly haven't seen that as a final girl. Out
No,
of
you
really any of
don't.
them, I know Sydney was prone to throw stuff going down the stairs, but there was still plenty of stuff at Sydney's disposal in every one of the movies. She could just start throwing shit.
Yeah, and she even picks up a box cutter she sees, and she keeps the box cutter and takes it with her. Like, she does literally everything that you could imagine that you could try to do to stay alive in that situation. And it works. She stays alive. She does not get offed, which of course we know that more than likely she's, because she's probably got plot armor, considering who her character is. But at the same time, like, it's refreshing to see someone actually struggle and put in the effort other than just the plot armor protecting them.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's plot armor. She's literally throwing beakers at this character's face.
That's what I'm
And this
saying. Like,
character
hers
has,
is not.
yeah, you have characters like Freddy and, well, especially Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, who you throw stuff at their face, that's not going to do much. They're wearing a mask. But this
Yeah,
character
but here it
isn't wearing
does.
a mask.
Exactly. And this character is also human. They're not superhuman. They're not immortal. They are very much a human being. So when they react accordingly, like if someone throws glass at you, you're gonna step back. You're gonna, have that recoil, and they do. And that's why Jody, is like, okay, this is doing something, so I'm gonna keep doing it. If I can get them further away, then I can try to get out the door and try to find help.
And this leads to, luckily, she's able to find her dad, and her dad takes her to the police station. They do a sketch composite of who the killer is, which is kind of smart. We have enough time here, we can do a composite. And Brent, her father, kind of notice who this looks like. And him and his friend, Tom Sisler, who's the principal of the school,
Sisler.
suspect it to be Laura Lee Sherman. And we're just sort of left as, okay, who's that?
Yeah, because I mean, we'd heard the name once before. We'd heard the name whenever they were knocking on Annette's door. They're like, it's Laura Lee Sherman. And so we'd heard that name previously, but other than that, we have no idea where that name's from or how that ties into the story or how Brent and the principal know this person, but they obviously do.
And I really like how the next day, when Jody goes to school, she's kind of the school celebrity.
Yeah, you can tell she's obviously not used to having that type of attention because she's not an it girl.
Mm-hmm.
So she's not used to having everyone and their mom suddenly want attention or whatever. And so you see her trying to make it through the school to her classes, and everybody's basically mobbing her, asking her questions, wanting to see if she's okay.
And Kenny gets in on the popularity.
Yeah, and Kenny's like, so they're having a fuckfest party so that we can all not be virgins, so we won't die. You should come with me to that party. And she's just like, I told my dad I'd go home because I almost got killed yesterday. So I'm gonna not. And he's just like, don't use your dad as an excuse. And she's just like, no, really, I genuinely told him I'd come home. After she's like, but I can try. And the only thing that gets Kenny to let up is the fact that the Prince deputy is standing, you know, a little bit
Watching
away,
her.
kind of eyeing
Yeah.
him down. Yeah, and he's just like, oh, she's telling the truth, so.
Hmm.
I guess we'll see what happens. And then he does that little, as he's walking away, he does that little jump heel click thing.
Uh-huh.
He's just like, I'm getting laid tonight. Like, and that cracked me up. And I was like, she said maybe, dude. She said maybe.
Maybe. Oh my gosh.
He's clicking heels over a maybe. He's that thirsty.
These characters are incredible.
But like that whole exchange between him and Jody kind of gave me more perspective into Kenny, because you can tell he genuinely cared about the fact that she could have died. Because he's just like, oh, I could have lost you, and I don't think I could have kept going if I'd lost you. And she's just like, really? He's like, yeah, I love you. And she's just like, okay. But you get kind of more perspective that he actually genuinely does care about her and doesn't necessarily just want to get into her pants.
See, I thought it was just a clout thing at first.
Like he was trying to get clout.
Yeah, he was just trying to be close to the popular girl. I thought that's all that was, but apparently not. But Jody decides to sit with her mother and ask about Lauralee. They're in the library or something. And
Yeah, because
her mom is
they
smoking?
take her back to the library. Yeah, see, well, you got to remember this was 2000s. This is before they started banning the smoking in public spaces.
I don't think so.
No, like I distinctly remember in my childhood, you'd go anywhere like the grocery store or out to eat at the restaurant, you'd have the smoking and non-smoking areas because people would smoke in the restaurants and stuff. So like I can definitely see people smoking inside. And I mean, my parents smoked like chain smokers, so if there was a place they could smoke, they were going to be smoking in it. Granted, I see how that's dangerous to smoke in a library, considered you're surrounded by paper everywhere and you ash in the wrong spot. And then what kills me is Jody's ashing her mom's cigarette for her.
And her
like
mother
as her
is
mom's
just
telling her
torn
story.
to pieces in this scene.
Yes, her mother's very emotional telling the story. So this is when we find out that basically who Lauralee Shermer is, because so far all we've heard is the name, and we know that Brent and the principal know who she is, but we haven't learned anything about it. But this is where we learn who she is. This is where Jody's mom sits down and tells Jody, because Jody point blank, because Jody had overheard her dad and the principal Sessler talking about it, but they didn't go into detail who it was. She just caught on that they mentioned that she disappeared over 25 years ago, and Brent was never able to find her, that he tracked her down to somewhere but never went to actually find her. And that's all we know. And so Jody, she goes, after she gets home from school, because she does keep her promise, she goes home after school. And when she gets home, she just kind of asks her mom, because she walks in and her mom's swigging straight from the alcohol bottle liquor and baking cookies, like really bad burnt
liquor hall.
cookies. Yeah. She's just like straight up just messed up. And she just kind of asks her mom, she's like, hey, do you know who Lauralee Sherman is? And she's just like, her mom's like, nope. Have no idea. I don't know. Never heard of her. And she's just like, Jody doesn't buy it. She's like, well, they said she disappeared like 25 years ago, and in a small town, that would be like a really big deal, wouldn't it? And her mom's like, no, I've lived here my whole life, except for the 2 years I spent at Berkeley, and I've never heard of her. And Jody's just like, yeah, whatever. So Jody then goes to the library, and she's going through reels and finds a news article, but right as she finds the news article, that's when she hears something in the background, and so we kind of get another moment where Jody's like, going through the school, like the library,
And this also
trying to
looks
find the
like
sound.
ass.
It does, and I loved it because she instinctively picked up a statue, like a statue, because she's just like, I might have to fight for my life again, so I'm gonna pick up the statue. It's the closest thing I got to a weapon, and it's just her mom. And this is where her mom talks about what happened with Lauralee, and I'll let you explain who she is.
I don't know. Her mom's up until this point says, I don't know who Lauralee Sherman is, and I absolutely know nothing about the time your father sexually assaulted her. But during this sit-down talk at the library, she finally goes into detail about Lauralee Sherman was a girl at school, and according to Lauralee, there was an incident where 4 people found her on the side of the road and sexually assaulted her. But Jody's father was not one that partook in those events. 2 of the men left town, and they were just kind of written out the story. Essentially, but the other 2 boys at the school at the time were the now principal and the sheriff. And from this point, Lauralee tried to say something about everything going on, but no one believed her at the time. So she kind of became an outcast, moved away from the town, and no one has heard from her since.
Yeah, and she's adamant to Jody that her dad was just really messed up and couldn't do anything to stop it or report it after the fact because these people, like the guys, like all four of them were like from big prominent good families in the town, and it would be like a really nobody would care
But
if they
Jody
did
sees
something wrong.
right through that shit.
Yep. She sure does. She is extremely disappointed because she even asked her mom. She's like, so he reported it, right? Like he brought it forward and he reported it to the police. And her mom's like, no, he couldn't do that. Those were his friends. And she's just like, ah, fuck that. Jody's just like, that's messed up. Jody immediately is just like empathetic with Laura Lee and understands that what her father did, even if her father didn't necessarily participate in the assault, he didn't do anything to stop it or report it after it happened, after witnessing it. So she immediately understands the issues that her father did wrong. And she doesn't try to sugarcoat it to herself. Mm-hmm. She accepts it and she sees it for what it is.
Yes, and that's actually a very nuanced perspective for early 2000s.
Yeah, because there's a lot of...
I feel this movie did a lot of... Now, don't get me wrong, it does fall short in some places, but it does do a lot nuance for this type of subject matter that we're only now seeing in mainstream film and television.
Yeah, it really did, because it did it in a way that also didn't make Laura Lee seem like she was the bad guy.
Well...
You think it for a minute, but...
Yeah, well, we'll get into it later. It's not she's the bad guy because of that. It's she's the bad guy because of something else, which is equal parts problematic and...
Yeah, that's true.
But we'll get there. This is a baby steps moment for us.
Yeah, and at this point, we're led to believe that Laura Lee Sherman, the one who was assaulted, she's the one that's going around killing the virgins. So it's easy to assume that the reason she's killing the virgins is because hers was taken from her. Mm-hmm. And then that was ripped, and her choice was taken away to make that decision. So she's decided that, she's going to take the choice away from the other children.
And after Jody finds out how terrible her parents are, she decides to confide in Kenny at his house. And they have a nice conversation. It's really mostly angsty teen babble. And then Jody tries to have sex. And before I watched this before Martha did, and I just sent her a Snapchat of the scene where Jody is just having her feet sucked on by Kenny.
And I think
and I'm like, you're gonna love this movie.
Because you know very well how I feel about feet. Mm-hmm. I hate feet. Like, that is one thing about me. Like, I can't stand feet. Don't touch me with your feet. Don't ask me to touch your feet. Don't touch my feet. Like, I just hate feet. Like, I will not even, like, my mom knows she has to ask my other sister if she wants someone to rub her feet because I will not do it. Like, I hate feet. And so, when you sent me that, I was like, I want to watch this movie now. And then when that scene started playing, I was like, oh no. And what killed me is she's like, bite it. And he does. And she's like, harder, Kenny, harder. And then she's just like, let's do it. And Kenny's like, I think you're just mad at your parents right now, and I want you. And this is when we get a different perspective on Kenny also, too. Yeah, I kind of like it too. He's like, I want you to do it with me because you want to do it with me. I don't want you to do it to get back at your parents or because you're frustrated or mad or because you feel like you have to. Like, I want you to want to be with me.
Because you want to be with me because I guilt tripped you into it, not because your parents.
And then what kills me is she's like, well, fine then I'm going to leave. And he's just like, no, stay, let's do it.
That's yay. I'll suck on your toes some more.
She's like, well, no, I'm going to go and do it with somebody else. And he's like, oh, Mr. Marliston, which is the English teacher. And she's just like, and this is also the scene where we're shown his shoe. That's the same shoe that was in the cafeteria that was lurking on her and him. Uh-huh. And so it kind of clicks in your head that he knows that she might have had the hots for teacher, because you kind of get that vibe when she's given her his English paper earlier in the movie, and then they go to look for who's creeping on him. You kind of get the vibe that the teacher and her have the hots for each other.
But honestly, the quiet, sensitive kid who didn't have a crush on their teacher.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, yeah, no, I get that. And so he's just like, oh, so you're gonna go do it with Mr. Marlison? And she's like, well, where did you come up with that idea? And she's just like, so now you just, you gonna follow me around everywhere and stalk me and stuff? And he's just like, no. And she's just like, yeah, well, I'm leaving. And that's exactly where she goes.
She goes exactly there, but this is where I put together what was going on in the movie. Because the mother makes it a point to say, 27 years ago,
Yep.
your father. And so that gives us a timeline of, okay, what happened 27 years ago? And you
And
start
then,
looking at characters who are 27 years old. And
yep.
I thought, oh, it's Mr. Marlson.
See,
Yeah.
I knew it was him. Not from the very, not from the very
He's
beginning.
cute, though, right?
He
Do we think
is. What
he's
else is he
cute?
in? Who
Oh my
plays him?
god,
He's in a lot of
exactly.
stuff in that time, but I can't remember his name. But so I don't know. He just gave off that I didn't want it to be him, but you know how you feel about it. So then we're given a scene where her dad Brent is just like, I need to go to West Virginia, and you know that earlier when he was talking to the principal, he mentioned, I had tracked Laura Lee to West Virginia, but I never went and found her. And he's just like telling his deputy, like, I gotta go. I gotta go to West Virginia. I gotta check something out. And so he goes and he finds this dilapidated house that you see a crib. And at this point, your brain starts going, okay, we know she was assaulted, and here's this home that's supposed to belong to her that has a child's crib in it. She had a child from that assault.
And that's where you're really putting stuff together. And during
Yeah.
this time, you're also seeing a news report of these homemade Xerox fanzine style posters that are being sent out about this high school orgy. Something about the pop your cherry something.
Yeah, it's the pop your cherry ball or the ball of popping cherries, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The
And they
cherry
put the
ball
cops.
popping.
And the cops go
Cock
and
and ball torture.
the cops go and they set up on each point of the they basically found this old abandoned, like, I guess, like, mansion, and they're like, it's bring your own bed. And these kids are just pairing up and doing it like everywhere in this house. And that's the party that Kenny wanted her to come to. And so we get scenes from this party. These kids start hooking up and stuff, and then we're brought to Jody, who is now gone to her English teacher's house because, according to her, he's about the only person she trusts now.
And he's
And
fumbling with some kind of a
a
trunk.
trunk. Yes, this really big trunk, and he looks startled. When Jody walks up to the house and he's pulling his trunk out of his car, he's just like kind of startled by it, but then he just immediately goes back into his normal character about, she's like, do you want help with that? And he's like, yeah, sure, I definitely would like help. And they're talking, and she's like, yeah, you're the only person I trust anymore. And he's like, oh, what about your parents? And she's like, yeah, well, I found something out about my dad. And he was just like, oh, that he's a criminal, he's a bad person. And she's like, yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And then then they push the trunk down the stairs to his basement, and she's like, "So what's in the trunk?" And this is the moment that I just like I was actually
This
surprised.
is a Luann moment.
It's
This
definitely
is where she is channeling her Luann.
yeah, she's just like kind of putting pieces together in her mind that it's weird that that trunk was so heavy and that it's immediately going to the basement, and he's just like, "Oh, that's your dad, and maybe mine." And then that's when you're just like, I knew it, I knew it, I
And
knew
she
it.
goes down to the basement to open the thing. She's like, Dad. And of course, her dad was kidnapped. Well, not
Yeah.
kidnapped. Her dad was abducted when he discovered the body of the principal with the words
Yeah.
virgin not carved on his forehead.
Yeah, because basically he got back from West Virginia and his deputy was like, "Hey, just so you know, the principal said that once you get back in town from wherever you're at, because he wouldn't tell the deputy where he was going. She was like, whenever you get back from wherever you're at, the principal's assistant called and said that you need to meet him at the high school ASAP. So he goes to the principal's office, and that's when he finds the principal with the virgin knot on his head, and that's when he gets kidnapped. Like, he gets whacked in the head.
But honestly, this is kind of how it works in small towns. TBH. All these terrible people, they become principals, they become public administrators, sheriffs, all that. And they just kind of throw nasty stuff under the rug.
Yep, they cover for each other and don't admit their wrongs because they don't have to because they're in power.
Yep.
And they have that power.
So now Jody is locked in the basement with Mr. Marlston, and she's tied to this reclining chair apparatus with her father.
Yeah, and another one across the room.
Yes, and Marlston is putting on his wig, heels, and lashes, going full drag. I don't think he's going to make it too far on Drag Race.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, this is when it really resonated that, like, they really try to put it in your face from the get-go, the female apparel and the hair and stuff to make you think that it's a female, so that you get the impression that it's Lorelei, that's the killer. And so, like, I kind of saw through that when I was like, they're making it too evident that it's a woman. I was like, it's gonna be a man in women's clothing and a wig. I was like, it's gonna be. And
I
so
really
when he,
like that Jody rode up there in a bicycle too.
yeah, because okay, so they're on these apparatuses.
Full semi-goth.
Yeah, and so they're on these apparatuses, and Marliston is going off about how he's the child
Like
of more than likely Brent, and Brent, and you know, Laura Lee was actually in love with Brent before he assaulted her, and how, because of how she was done by him, his mother basically abused him.
Yes, and we get the truth that her father was involved in it. Yeah. He was super drunk, but his friends did put him on top of her, and he did know what was going on.
Exactly, because he's just like, I knew what I was doing. He's like, I knew what I was doing completely. And at this point, this is when we get a flashback to, not a flashback, but like we get a scene at the party where Kenny's just like, Sharon's like all on Kenny and stuff, and Kenny's like, you know, I don't want to do this with you, Sharon. He's like, I want to go find Jody. And he had guessed before that Jody was going to go to Mr. Marliston, so that's where he goes.
Okay, but,
he goes to Mr. Marliston.
Pre-K pause here. We got this nice little extra who says, who tells Sharon, I always knew he was a butt pirate. I always knew he was a butt pirate. To a guy who was clearly a, quote, butt pirate.
Yeah,
and this coming from a gay man, and that it just feels like they were trying to portray this guy as having to compensate for something.
And even Sharon's just like, yeah, no, I'm not messing with you.
I wish him and Timmy were able to get together. If you have
maybe that could be an alternate ending.
Yes, if you have any Timmy / whoever this guy is fan art out there, please send it to the Deep Cuts of Horror email or post it on Twitter and add us at Deep Horror Pod.
Yeah, we need that in our lives, like ASAP, because that would have been beautiful. That would have been a beautiful scene. Imagine that being like a deleted scene.
I'm
like,
inspiring you
over
right now.
like...
Please give it to us. We want it. Maybe have them recreating the scene where Jody has her foot in Kenny's mouth. Martha's dying. You can't see it, but she's dying.
Gosh, I'd be traumatized. Because there's nothing I love more than gay men. But not feet. I don't like feet. I'm going to take away something I love, Dylan.
Make it happen now. I'm serious. So Kenny goes to try to see what's going on with Jody at Mr. Marlston's house. And apparently this house is within walking distance.
This is what kills me. Kenny drives up in his car, and he bangs on the door, and so Marliston, he goes up, and he puts a robe on, takes his wig off or whatever, and Kenny's just like, hey, where's Jody? And he's like, oh, Jody's not here, and he's like, well, her bike's right there. Like, why is her bike here? And Marliston he realizes Marliston's wearing lipstick, and he's like, so why are you wearing lipstick? And Marliston's like, it makes me look pretty. And that's when Kenny's like, yeah, you're fucked. And he kicks Marliston and runs in the house because he knows something is wrong. Like, and this is where Kenny really redeems himself, because he genuinely kind of saves the day with this. He hears Jody at that point, like she's knocked over something, and he hears it, so he runs downstairs. He starts to untie her, gets her untied, and starts working on the sheriff, gets him kind of untied, and then Marliston comes busting through, because Marliston has picked up an axe outside and is broken his way back into the house, because Kenny had closed the door when he was coming in, because Kenny's not an idiot. Like, he had the instincts to close the door. This is where, although it is walking distance, even though he drove up in his car, it is still walking distance from the mansion. So while Marliston comes back in, he starts wilding out, trying to kill everybody, and Kenny's able to get Jody away. Jody doesn't want to leave because her dad's still there, but he pulls her away, and the sheriff is, Brent's left dealing with Marliston, and after, a few back and forth, ultimately Marliston prevails and kills Brent. He basically axe murders him, which was pretty brutal. Although I kind of was disappointed that they didn't show him actually, like, the axe coming down on Brent at all. You just see that him.
Yeah, you don't really
Marliston
get a
swinging
whole
the
lot
axe.
of actual gore shots.
No.
But
They saved that for later.
I knew Brent did have to die, though.
Yeah, he really did. Because there was no redeeming his character. I mean, he wasn't. I don't think he was necessarily a bad man. I think he was genuinely remorseful for what he did.
But at the same time, he did actively try to cover it up. And
Yes.
also was a key figure in gaslighting this poor
Jody.
woman into mental into mental insanity, to where she had to live in the outskirts of town in a spooky house and just mercilessly beat her son.
Yeah, for looking like the man that she used to love that assaulted him. Because that was
where we get
Marliston's
into the
main point.
problematic aspect of the story.
Exactly. Like,
Do things like that create generational trauma? Yes. 100%. But
I mean,
maybe
especially
the depiction isn't as nuanced as you want. And perhaps if you can't depict it with the medium of a horror movie, maybe you shouldn't depict it at all.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, in this movie, the only person that I think is genuinely good is Jody. Like, there's not another character in that movie. And even Jody, like, I'm trying to think of something that she does that's not, like, really a great person, but I mean, like, she's not hateful to Sharon, even though Sharon's up on her man. She's not hateful to Kenny other than just not wanting to sleep with him and telling him no. I mean, she doesn't, like, the worst she does is pretty much tell her mom that her mom's being, like, basically delusional for not seeing her husband's actions for what they are.
You could argue that she was problematic because she didn't try to come forward with any of the information she learned, but at the same time, we've had maybe a day from this happening, and as a kid, your dad's the sheriff. What channels are you going to go through to tell people about this? And in fact, you also need your own time to work out your feelings and the best way to approach this.
Doesn't matter at that point, because at that point, everyone that's involved is basically dead. Everyone that could have been brought to justice is basically dead. Laura Lee's, we don't find out what happened to her. I think, but it's safe to assume she's probably gone too. Or at least not to the point that she would get any satisfaction from anyone coming forward or talking about it.
Still, having these individuals who are in power dethroned would be nice.
Well, I mean, ultimately they were dead.
I feel like they were doing a bit of sequel baiting, because we never find out if Laura Lee is dead, and we don't really learn about the other two guys. They're just written out the story. They don't even have a name. They're just two other guys who left town.
Once Kenny pulls Jody from the house, they then run back to the party. But what kills me is Kenny drove up in his car. Why?
And I get movie logic. Marlston would have probably broke through the window. Now, in actuality, that's probably not going to happen, though. I've tried breaking into a window because I locked my keys in the car, and I had a shitty car at the time. And it's easier said than done. You put full force with a rock and you're not even gonna really do much to it.
They run back to the fuck lodge, and...
The fuck lodge.
Well, that's what it is.
Yes, where everybody's wearing underwear.
All the kids are in their underwear. But so they run back to the fuck lodge, and they run into one of the cops that are set up around the perimeter, and they're just like, hey, Brent's dead, my dad's dead. Marliston killed him. Marliston killed everybody, and he's chasing us. And the cop's like, well, I can't do anything. I can't leave my post, but let me tell the others real quick. And after he gets done telling the others, Marliston's caught up, and we just see an axe coming down on the cop's head, from behind. And that's Jody and Kenny take off again, running towards the house. They run into the house where everybody, like you said, is still in their underwear. They're just all paired up in their underwear.
Marliston's a killer, and they're kind of like, what? And then Marliston shows up, and that's when all-out panic starts, and everybody's running. And it's so like, hilarious.
Class dismissed.
Yeah, okay. As much shit as the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre got for the scene where you have the influencer pointing the phone at Leatherface and say, try anything and you're canceled, bro. This This right here is just pure camp, and I love it.
Yeah, because he's like deranged. He's wearing the wig and the everything else. He's covered in blood, and she's just like, "It's Mr. Marliston. He's the killer." And he busts in, and he's just like, "Class dismissed."
And everyone starts running. It's panic. I love it. Everybody's trying to go down the stairs. They can't. It bottlenecks, and then the force of all the people breaks the stairs, and they just start collapsing on top of each other and off of each other. Doesn't it end up killing one of the deputies? I think she's okay.
She doesn't die.
You
Yeah,
just
she
see
ends up being
blood coming.
okay. But that's like a plot device to pretty much keep her from saving the day, is she gets pinned under all these teenagers, and she can't really do anything, so Kenny and
What
Jody
more
are
do
just
you
getting
expect
chased
in a
around.
teenage fuck lodge?
Yeah, and so Marliston tracks down Kenny and Jody in the house, and first he finds Jody by herself, and he goes to attack Jody and does a decent number on her, and then Kenny comes to save the day, and Kenny gets stabbed.
I love every side character in this has such a good role to play. The stoner guy and his friend, they have their little scenes in the fuck lodge, and everywhere Jody tries to hide, there's always someone in the closet just hooking
Yeah,
up, and she's like, "As you
yeah.
were."
Yeah, no, that cracked me up. She opens up, it's like a broom closet type thing, and there is this nerdy kid with
And
the girl
her
that he
friend.
scored. Yeah, and she's just like, "Stay there," and then she closes it again, and she tries to find somewhere else to escape, and then she eventually, there's a tussle. Kenny gets stabbed, then he comes after Jody again, and way earlier in the movie, when all the murders started happening, you get a scene where Brent is showing Jody some self-defense maneuvers, and he's walking her through it, and you kind of get a flashback of different moments throughout the movie that set Jody off, and she becomes extremely like instinctive survival, and as he goes to swing the axe, she used that defense maneuver to throw him out the window, and then he lands on of course, that banister type thing, it's the broken banister, and he falls on it, and he pretty much impales himself.
This is
And you
basically, real quick now that we're here, this is basically a Franken movie of a lot of different slashers.
Yeah.
You have an amalgamation of the Hookman story where you have the two people parking in a car. You have the Scream aspect of it with the opening and some scenes of two that were popular. You also have the dynamic of the parents and the daughter and the sins of the past that we get in Nightmare on Elm Street. And then you have this ending, which mirrors things that we've seen in Halloween, where eventually Michael Myers is shot and he backs up off of the balcony and falls off.
Yep.
And that's pretty much the scene that happens here. She tosses him over her shoulder and he just loses all his balance and goes off of the balcony of the top floor and lands on the ground. Onto, though, some, stair railing that broke?
I don't think it's stair railing. It's, the
Trellis?
yes, it was like a broken trellis is what it was.
Trellis.
It was a
Okay.
broken trellis, and he falls on it and impales him. And this is where you see another another supporting character, Mark, the stoner kid, and he gets real close to him. And Mr. Marliston basically acts like he's still alive, and he like grabs Mark's hair, and then you see the deputy run out, and she just literally shoots his hand off. and then pumps a whole bunch of lead into him, and then you just see these kids that are now just on the stairs, just looking petrified, covered in Marliston's blood, and the one kid, Mark, still has his hair, like his hand, like in his
because
hair.
the deputy sheriff is double barrel double gunning it. She has two guns
Yes.
in either hand. And when I see that, I think, oh my god, this kid is gonna die. Because no one can have that kind of aim with two guns.
But she did apparently, because she shot, and it was at the wrist, and just the whole hand came off, and it was still attached in Mark's hair. So she had to have decent aim to not kill that poor kid.
Isn't Kenny still alive?
Yes, Kenny still lives, which, I mean, he got stabbed in the gut, so it's believable that he survived that. So you then see, like, Kenny come out to the balcony where Jody's standing, and he's alive still, and Jody's just, kind of cradling him, and then we get the last scene of the movie where it takes
Jody
us to
is, yes.
the FBI are talking to Jody, and they're just like, "So you have no idea why your dad was in West Virginia?" She's like, "Nope." "So you have no idea about why Mr. Marliston would want to kill all these kids?" And she's like, "Nope." And they're like,
Which
"Do you
is
have anything
shitty.
else?" Yeah, she's like, do you have anything else you want to tell us about it? And she's like, nope. And they just let her and her mom go.
Clearly, devil's
Um,
advocate, I understand her reasoning, but on a wholly realistic level, now's your time to right some wrongs of the past. Everybody who
yeah,
was
that was me
affected by
too.
it, they are dead, but you can still right some wrongs of the past by just saying what happened.
See,
Because
see,
now
I,
you're
I
kind
feel
of
that way
just as
too.
bad as them. And
Yeah.
as they leave town, Jody sees someone resembling Laura Lee disappear behind a school bus. And then the movie ends with a very terrible shot of the aptly named Cherry Falls outside of town turning red. So, Martha, we've talked about it. We've kind of broken it down. What are your thoughts about this movie as a whole?
I really liked it. Like, it was an enjoyable movie to watch. Like, even though there were some things that I saw coming, way before they happened, it was
That's a
still
slasher
really.
movie. Come on.
That's just how it is. Like, yeah, that's just how it is. If you like slasher movies, if slasher movies are your thing, you're definitely gonna enjoy this movie.
Especially if
As
you
far
like
as
the late 90s whodunit that Scream implemented.
yeah, especially that because it does try to present multiple characters as the possible murderer, throughout the course of the film, and like even with Kenny, they even try to at one point try to make you think that it's Kenny. And I mean, like it's got those tropes, but it does it in its own unique way that while it's like a conglomerate of a bunch of different possible movies, it's very own thing. So I enjoyed it. I haven't seen anything like, I mean, yeah, there's similar tropes and stuff, and like you mentioned before, it's like a whole bunch, like a mashup of a bunch of different things. It's still very interesting and fun to watch.
Oh, yeah. And they had to do just something I was reading about the orgy scene. They had to do some reshoots because they did have nude scenes for that, but it originally garnered them an X rating.
Yeah, and I mean that, and it really just wouldn't have fit into the movie, to be honest.
I mean, the movie, I think this was a morally rated movie more than it was a content rated movie. I truly think we have a PG 13 horror movie here, but because of the content about teens talking about sexuality and those things and the content of sexual assault, it got an R rating just for that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, because there's not a whole lot of gore. There is gore, but it's nothing that you would avert your eyes from, especially now.
Yeah, especially now, especially to what they've done, in horror movies since then, and even a few before then. It's not nearly as gory. It's definitely more of like character driven, honestly, for me. And like the characters are interesting. They're fun to watch the characters interact and have those relationships and stuff with each other. Like it's actually really interesting to watch Jody as she goes through the process of realizing her dad's not perfect and her dad has made some really terrible mistakes and is not the person that she's always believed him to be.
But honestly, isn't that what we all do as teenagers going into adulthood when we start seeing our parents and grown-ups more as people and less of these indestructible superhumans that know
Yeah.
everything and are flawless? We stop seeing things aren't the way they are. They're just our conception of them because we're around them and that's what we perceive as normal, but
Yeah,
actually
I
they're
mean,
not.
exactly. I mean, I remember the first time I realized my mom didn't know everything.
Yeah.
Like because when you're a kid, like I genuinely believed my mom knew everything about everything. And so like I remember the first time she was just like, "Well, I'm not sure." She's like, "I'm not sure how that works." And I'm just like, "What do you mean you don't know? Like you tell me everything, like how the world works. How do you not know? Like if you don't know, who does?" Like
Right.
I remember that the very first time I had that moment of, "Oh my gosh, like wow, like my mom doesn't know everything." And my mom's not perfect, and that's something that you discover more as you get older, because it's definitely not something you realize as a child. Because as a child, your parents, they set the rules, so if they say something's a type of way, then it's a type of way. You don't really question it.
And this movie does play on that. And like I said, it's a Franken movie. It kind of takes all the best bits out of a lot of teen slashers and tries to make them work. I think if we had a better budget, because 14 million even in the 90s really wasn't that much.
No, I mean for a movie, not really. It's just watching it. It's hard to see. It's hard to see where that was spent. Like I don't know. Well, I'll have to look more into like the actual shooting of it because it just
Huh. Well, I was thinking maybe it was low, but Scream was made on $14 to $15 million.
Yeah,
So it
but it
had
looked a lot
almost the
better.
same budget as Scream.
Yeah.
So
So I
I'm
mean,
not sure why this movie looks like ass. And I'm
I
sure a
think
lot
it
of
was
that
spent
was
on the
using
school. Honestly, I feel like it was spent on renting the damn school, honestly.
because you think Scream probably had to get a lot of licensing because they make a lot of references to horror movies and they even have an actual scene from Halloween
Yeah,
that they had to get
exactly.
rights for.
And I don't remember there really being any like possible copyrighted material in this movie in Cherry Falls. Now that
No,
I'm thinking about it, like
no.
and I don't really remember spotting any product placement either
Oh
or
no, there was
anything like
product
that.
placement.
Was there?
I caught a Coke product placement, I think.
It's odd. I normally notice those like a hawk. Maybe I was just focused on other stuff in it, but I mean, overall, it's a solid movie. Like I'm genuinely gonna watch it again. I'm probably gonna buy it for my collection. I enjoyed it. I mean, Brittany Murphy did a fantastic job of being a final girl. Like I think she goes right on up there with some of my favorite girls, like Alice from Nightmare on Elm Street. Like she honestly, like I feel
Okay, let's
kind
talk
of
about this real quick since you brought that up. A lot of people have their final girls, and I know you tend to lean toward Nightmare on Elm Street. Between Alice and Nancy, are you Team Alice or Team Nancy?
no. I'm always gonna be Team Alice.
Okay, I can see that and respect it. Just know that I'm a Nancy.
I know that you're a Nancy.
But I also really love Alice as well.
I mean, I like Nancy, don't get me wrong, I genuinely do. And I kind of hated that in the end she ultimately lost to Freddy. Like, I hate that. But it needed to happen. Like,
We need
that's
another
just.
Alice movie.
We really do. We genuinely do. Because she just. She
She
just
just
killed
knocked it
it.
out. And I know the actress, she's still out and about. I'm sure she'd love to do one.
Well, because, I mean, like, if you look at Alice when you first meet her in the movies, she's timid. She doesn't come out of her shell. You would not think she is going to be the heroine that ultimately ends up saving the day and then on multiple occasions saving herself and then saving her unborn baby. Like that to me is just she just develops so well. I think is why I like her so much because she develops into such a strong character.
She does. But let's talk a little bit about the release and why this isn't a more well-known film. So when it was released, like I said, the money that it made was equivalent to £85,000 is what I read online. It has a very mixed review online, but it seemed that people who got it really got it, and those that didn't really didn't. There's someone in Entertainment Weekly called it the wittiest and most subversive teen thriller since Heathers, which I love Heathers. I know you love Heathers. It's a
Yeah,
very
like
apropos connection. But those that didn't like it really didn't like it, and it just didn't really reach as far because it was released on VHS around 2000s, and that was that weird time when DVDs and VHS were going hand in hand, and we were kind of having that little war. When it was released on DVD, it was released on a double feature, Terror Tract, so you could only get it in the double feature. And it remained out of print from 2000s all the way until 2015 when Scream Factory released the Blu-ray for it. Yes.
That probably plays a big key into why it's so unknown. Is if it wasn't readily available, like if it wasn't somewhere that people could like I'm sure that when it first released it had places in the rental shops and stuff, but the people who would normally enjoy that were renting movies, they normally like to rent what they knew already. They usually wouldn't rent what was unknown because when you watch a horror movie you take a gamble because
And
sometimes
that's
they're
exactly what this
amazing.
show's for, yeah. You can watch something you're familiar with or you can watch something you're unfamiliar with. And you're really gambling probably about 40-60 on if it's just going to be total crap.
Yeah, and horror movies specifically are like that because the creative process that goes into a horror movie, there's so much that you could do, but there's also so much that you could do that people just they're not going to freaking get. Like,
Right.
it's going to go over their head, or they're just going to think the thought behind it's weird, or gory, or just unnecessary. Like, it takes certain types of people that enjoy, like, horror and slasher films that would enjoy this. Do I think the average consumer would sit down and enjoy it?
Probably not.
Probably not, because you've got scenes like the scene where, Kenny's sucking on her toes. That would just weird them out, and they'd be like, yeah, no, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
And it really is a detracting visage that parts of this movie just look straight up amateur, half-assed film school
Yeah,
quality.
exactly. And there's some people that'll watch it and they'll just, it'll make them feel either uncomfortable or weird about it. Because just some people are like that with horror movies in general.
And
'Cause
considering Brittany Murphy's career in the early 2000s, would I watch it? Yes, but Brittany Murphy herself isn't as much of a pull to get me to sit down and watch a movie that looks like this in
no,
2000.
not in 2000. Yeah, not in 2000.
Especially since the market at the time was also saturated with other movies that were basically replicating the Scream formula. You had Scream
Yeah.
still pumping out sequels. You had movies like Urban Legend, the remake of April Fool's Day, Valentine. It was a complete resurgence where they were just getting hot people to be in movies.
Exactly. And I mean, at that point, Brittany Murphy wasn't as big as she's known to be now, and she didn't have the fan base that she has now. So,
And unfortunately, a lot of that had to do with her death.
yeah, ultimately, yeah. She's definitely more of a cult following now that she's not here anymore.
Much more of a
And,
legacy actress.
definitely, because I mean, like when you watch like interviews and stuff, because what she got absolutely decimated by the media. She couldn't do anything.
She wasn't the it girl that they wanted, but we see in things like this there is a market for her because she is
had
more
talent.
relatable. She's very talented. She's just more alternative, and this movie proves there is a market for her in that. I've really wanted to see her in more teen movies where she got to play this alternative kind of character.
Yeah.
But also still a very real and very connectable. Because you look at her, you look at how they dress her and stuff, you automatically think, I'm not really going to relate to this character. But
yeah, like
in
an
the
Uptown
things she
Girls and
does
stuff.
and how she talks to people, you find yourself being more agreeable to her and rooting for her.
Yeah, I would have been so mad if she died. Like 1,000%, I would have been pissed off. I mean, I knew she probably wasn't going to, but like I'd have been pissed. I'd have been like, she put up a damn fight. Like she deserved to be like top-notch final girl for sure.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we never got a sequel.
And that kind of sucks because I definitely see where you're talking about where they set it up where they could very easily do one. And I think one would have been enjoyable. It could have possibly sprung like a franchise like Scream did, because like for example the Friday the 13th movies. In that original movie, Jason's not the killer.
Yeah.
It's his mom.
Spoiler alert.
And sorry, I figure if anybody's listening to this, they've probably seen Friday the 13th. So sorry for the spoilers, guys.
I make
but
it
from
fully
the rest
clear
of the
that the
franchise,
prerequisites for this show are you have to see the big three at least.
yeah, at this point, because these are deep cuts, guys. These are not going to be your box office ones that all horror fans have seen. So you should have seen Friday the 13th by now, guys. But for the rest of the franchise, it's Jason from that point. But that very first movie, it is not Jason. It springs the ability for the sequel for then Jason to come in and start being the slasher. And I feel like that could have been something like this, where then now it's opened the door for maybe Lauren Lee to come and get her personal revenge.
So this movie, you just made a really good point. It is a exact reversal of Friday the 13th, where instead of us thinking it's the mother, it's actually the son. Whereas in Friday the 13th, we thought it was the son, but it's actually the mother, which was also a play on Psycho, which we thought it was the mother, but it was the son. So it's a crisscross, crisscross, crisscross.
Yep.
Or triple X, if you will.
Triple X. Triple X is a whole nother can of worms.
Triple X.
I forgot that
cuts.
existed till just now.
We're gonna do triple X deep cuts.
Oh Lord, please no.
I don't
only
even
handle
know
so
how
much
we would
Van
go
Diesel
about
in a
that.
day. I don't know. I can only handle so much Van Diesel in a day.
Oh my gosh.
Did you know that? Okay, I was told at one point in my childhood that Van Diesel was gay. Is he gay?
No.
I don't think so. I think that was like an actual legitimate thing people told me, that Van Diesel was
I
gay.
think that was just a toxic masculinity thing so that women wouldn't love him as much.
Probably, because like I don't think Van Diesel's gay.
No, he kind of radiates straight energy.
Well, it's
Looking
not
at him,
just
I get
that.
the same feeling I get when I walk into an auto zone.
Well,
I'm
that,
just
and I
bored,
feel like
but also out of place.
I feel like if he was, though, I feel like the gays would make a big deal out of it. They'd be like, yeah, Vin Diesel's gay. And he'd be like a gay icon. Even though he doesn't radiate gay energy, he'd still be recognized in the gay community as being gay and being a big blockbuster movie star.
Okay, sure. I mean, I'm not gonna
speak for the community, but
I'm not gonna speak for the community, but it's kind of like whenever they said Taylor Swift was the queen of the gays.
And I feel like I need to preface this by saying I can say shit because I'm also a member of the LGBT community, so I'm not just a straight out here talking shit.
Too, so here we go. Y'all are welcome. Okay, so we have one last part of the show we gotta cover. It is our deeper cut segment. So basically how this works, our listeners know, we decide if this movie is deep, meaning we like it, we think you will too, or if it deserves to be cut, meaning something needs to change about it, or you shouldn't watch it and you didn't enjoy it. So Martha, do you think this movie was deep, or do you think it deserves to be cut?
Oh, I think it's deep. I think definitely people really need to watch it. Like, I think it's enjoyable. I feel like they're gonna enjoy watching it, especially if they enjoy slashers or horror in general. Like, it's definitely something they need to watch.
I guess right now all you can do is watch it on DVD, because I literally scoured the internet trying to buy or rent a copy for Martha to watch, and all I could find was AMC Plus had it for 3.5 more hours at that time before it went off. So maybe pick up a Scream Factory Blue of it. Usually they do sales. And like I said, the deep cuts, you're not always going to be able to find a digital copy for these movies. Or you never know when they're going to get pulled from streaming right before you need to record the episode. To echo your statement, I'm going to say I also think this movie is deep. It's very good. Some parts of it are amateurish, but I really had a good time with the characters. They weren't all stock characters. I love the side characters. I felt each one of them could have their own little mini movie, and I would have loved it. R.I.P. Brittany Murphy. She is a talent, and she honestly, if this movie, you can poke holes in this movie, but what you can't poke holes in is the capability of Brittany Murphy as a final girl. She had me feeling for her. She was doing mostly the right decisions. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, wasn't, but that's okay. Stress, trauma, we get it. But I'm going to echo your statement and say that I also think this is deep.
It definitely is. Guys, if you can find it, it's definitely worth it to try to find it, because you're definitely missing out as a horror slasher fan if you don't get to enjoy this movie at least once.
All right. Well, Martha, it was great to have you here. I really hope you can come back. I hope we haven't scared you away.
No, I definitely love getting to do this with you, so certainly look forward to doing further deep cuts in the future and talking with you about these movies moving forward.
Well, good, because I have a whole list of ones that we're gonna do together. You didn't really. I was just giving you the illusion of a choice.
Of a choice. I love that for us.
Yes,
yeah,
considering you're going to be at my house for a good little bit, I do plan on hijacking you.
That's okay. What's the point of a vacation if I can't work a little?
Exactly. I mean, if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. Come on.
Exactly.
Alright guys, well I guess that's it for this episode. Martha, it was such a pleasure having you. I love talking to you every time we're together. We gotta have you back on the show at some point. I would also like to take a moment to thank our incredible listeners. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to us. Those of you that come in every week and listen, it really is an honor to put something on for you guys that we hope you enjoy. If you haven't already, go ahead, rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you haven't already, go over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, give us a 5-star. We'd really appreciate that. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Deep Horror Pod. Again, that is at Deep Horror Pod for both of those. You can also email us at deepcutsofhorror@gmail.com. Stay tuned next time for when we go over the movie Frailty with Matthew McConaughey. We're super excited about that. And until next time, guys, stay spooky.